Disruptive by Design podcast from Signal Media. I'm Kimberly Underwood, the Director of Digital News Media at AFCEA International. And for those who don't know, Signal is the official news outlet of AFCEA. In this episode of the Disruptive by Design podcast, I'm speaking to Jake Dustan, who is a cybersecurity consultant at EY, or Ernst & Young. He is their Chief of Staff for Aerospace and Defense in EY's Americas division. He's a mover and shaker in the cyber field, helping his clients in understanding the ramifications of cyber threats. He works with senior executives and others to prepare and strategize about cyber threats and really, how they handle the, enormous and ongoing, cyber risks in this environment. It's a fascinating side of the cyber field. I was glad to learn more about that side. And I enjoyed hearing about Jake's career path. He started out in the finance world. And every year, AFCEA recognizes distinguished professionals, those under 40. And in 2023, Jake was selected as one of AFCEA's Distinguished Young Professional Award recipients. Jake is also becoming the new president of AFCEA's South Carolina Lowcountry Chapter, which is based in Charleston. And this is a great feat for somebody under 40. And Jake talks about kind of how they're revitalizing that chapter and growing their programs. And he's excited to kind of take the helm. So we'll have to keep our eye on that chapter and what they're up to. And with that, welcome to Disruptive by Design and Jake Dustan. Well, thanks for sitting down with me, Jake. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thanks for having me today, Kimberly. My name's Jake Dustan. I am currently the Chief of Staff for Aerospace and Defense for EY, focused on the Americas, as well as a cybersecurity consultant, largely focused on the defense industry while I'm here at the firm. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I have this interesting long lineage of Navy on one side, and then on the other side, we have these kind of large defense and intelligence contributions spanning Office of War Information and Propaganda to the Manhattan Project, all the way down to the Blue-Green Laser Project. And my uncle actually works at Johns Hopkins and does robotics for DARPA. So it's this kind of interesting family lineage that somehow wound up with me as a consultant back in the industry that kind of got my family going.
Nice. And kind of, what does it mean to be a consultant? Tell us a little bit about your role at EY. And I guess for those who don't know, that was Ernst & Young, but you go by EY, I guess, now.
Yeah. So we sort of have slid into that great, like, PwC, we're going to shorten our name mentality. But really what I do as a consultant and my primary focus is incident response management and cyber resilience. So I come in and help generally large corporations figure out how they're going to manage cyber attacks to mitigate the impact to their infrastructure and their clients, and really whatever they're producing, right, and their systems as best as possible. So at the end of the day, I'm helping companies withstand cyber attacks, preferably preparing pre-boom for post-boom.
Right, yeah. You make that sound easy.
I wish it were, but at the same time, it's a great challenge.
Right. And it seems like such a great need to, given the like sheer amount of cyber threats. I think that's all I hear about. And it, makes me nervous, scared, because they're coming at us on all different angles from all different threats. And it just is ramping up and up and, there's no let up, really.
Yeah, and that actually leads into an interesting point that I kind of wanted to touch on, is generative AI and the application of artificial intelligence to really augmenting our cyber protections. But what I would say there, and this is a little bit of a differentiation in my mind of, we've got artificial intelligence, but when I think about people interacting with the quote unquote I think about it as augmented intelligence, where yes, we're going to see jobs go away in some industries. We're going to see people upskilled. Hopefully, we'll see cost reductions, savings, all this great stuff. But at the end of the day, I think when you look at both what cyber attackers are doing and cyber defenders are doing, we're really augmenting our capabilities as creative, thinking, inquisitive individuals using this supercharged technology. And I think that's where in my mind, there's no way we can keep up with the onslaught of cyber attacks. But if we apply these technologies appropriately, they can really amplify what we're able to do as individuals.
Right. And are you starting to see more of that where this generative AI piece is being applied to cyber defenses in addition to, automation and other cybersecurity practices?
Yeah. So like Microsoft has come out with Copilot for Defender, and there are all these other different solutions that are coming out that are fantastic for really augmenting how people do respond. Um, what strikes me though is, for instance, the more recent SEC cyber guidance in terms of reporting for public companies. One of the things that hits me about that, and I'm not quite honestly sure where they landed towards the end on correlative reporting, but I think where we're going to see a lot of benefits from AI, and at the same time, people utilizing that AI to knit the different pieces together is when it comes to correlating seemingly disparate attacks. So if you've got something way over here and something over on the left and something over on the right, and none of them seem to be aligned because they're hitting different systems, if we can have systems that expedite the ability to connect those dots and realize, whoa, this is a coordinated attack, that's some of the real power that we're seeing. And that's something that back when I was in financial services years ago, we were figuring out how do we navigate this? And at the same time, how do we both train our people and our systems to connect those dots quickly and understand the impact and the intent of that attacker as opposed to just the different dots?
Right, sure. And can you talk about a little bit of kind of the skills or tools you've had to amass to, be this chief of staff and be a cyber consultant, and kind of a little bit about what you learned in the financial services industry?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And great question. Because one of the things that I've realized about consulting is one, it's incredibly intense. Two, you build a lot of PowerPoint decks. But three, there's a lot that goes into the back end of those, right? So a lot of what I've spent my career doing, both pre EY and then now at EY, is tabletops and doing simulations and running people through not just a simulated attack, but really getting them to experience what that attack feels like. And one of my favorite moments in an exercise is when you levy an inject or you provide that next step in the storyline, right? And all of a sudden, you can hear a pin drop in the room. And that to me, as a moment, is one of the best teaching experiences and teaching tools you can use, particularly for executives. And so part of what I've really worked on amplifying and has really helped me as a consultant is a storytelling ability and applying different rhetorical mechanisms to the way that I'm conveying information and to the way that I'm telling that story so that it resonates with people. Because it's that you can tell them something, but if you make them feel something, it's way more impactful.
Right, sure. And to be able to translate the risks of an attack to so people can feel it and understand it. I'm sure that takes some skill. It's not just like the digital side of what an attack may be like, but in a simulation, but kind of how the company will respond, or the organization, or because it comes down to people. So yeah, that does sound fascinating.
Yeah, cyber is so much a people industry. Because you think about it, it's all tools that are being used person to person. It's hand-to-hand combat with all sorts of fancy tools in many ways. But if you take that a step further, what I would say is that, um, yeah, it's about both making people feel things and speaking to them in their own language and meeting them where they are. Because when I'm talking to, let's say, a chief information security officer, I'm going to speak in very different vernacular than if I'm speaking to the head of cyber operations, or if I'm speaking to a C-suite executive to whom the CISO reports, or the board. So if I'm working with, for instance, the board of a major financial institution or a major defense contractor, I can't walk in talking about vulnerabilities and scanning. That's not relevant to their world. And same thing when it comes to cyber risk and quantification of that, where it's if I go to you and I say, cyber attack is going to do X, Y, and Z, and these systems are going to be taken down, and this is going to be our RTO, and yada, 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 you're going to go, that's not my world. If I come to you and I say a cyber attack is probably going to occur successfully in the next 5 years, within that time frame, we're probably going to see a maximum impact of 10 million and a minimum impact of 1 million. So we're looking at a $3 million exposure with this level of probability. A board member can go, okay, so in the next 5 years, I'm probably going to lose $6 million to a cyber attack. I'm going to give you the $10 million you need to cover up those holes so that we don't risk hitting that maximum impact, right? Or even better, if it's $500,000 for $600,000 in savings, or 6 million in savings, excuse me.
Right. Yeah. To put it in kind of, numbers like that for them to see, I could see how important that is for them to
It's,
understand.
yeah, it's like, how do I speak to you in your language? That's the biggest thing to me. And that's one of those things that I've really gathered as a consultant is meeting people where they are and telling stories, I think.
Right. And I have a soft spot in my heart for a consultant. I started my career, way back when as a young kid out of college, working for a consulting firm in the energy industry, and it was in renewable energy, and it was all very fascinating. And I was kind of more on the analysis, writing side to help, our leaders, our officials kind of be able to translate, the benefits of X, Y, and Z. Um, are there tools or other things that you rely on? um, I don't know, like, are you constantly reading about emerging technologies in the cyber field, or how do you stay on top of the technological know-how that you need to understand in your field?
Yeah, that's honestly a really great point because there is so much information out there and such a deluge. And it's this mixture of looking, in my mind, at trends and sticking with that emerging technology, and at the same time understanding what in cyber we call TTPs. So basically the techniques, tactics, and procedures in terms of, or processes, in terms of how cyber attackers do what they do, because chances are Lazarus Group, i.e. the North Koreans, may start using generative AI to create phishing emails to try to break into banks and things. But at the end of the day, they still have the same motivations. And so to me, it's this, if I understand my attacker and I understand the technologies, I'm a lot more prepared to handle them, even as the technologies evolve. And so that's where, to me, I really love studying the strategic threat intelligence and understanding their motivations, because that allows me to understand what they're going to go after. And then I can look at, okay, what's that bridge between the two of them and how are they probably going to get there? And I also have the luxury of not always being in the fog of war, right? I'm not a true incident responder where I jump in and get my hands dirty and do the hand-to-hand combat. They're going to be more focused on the technical side. But a lot of what I'm focused on is really, what are our clients concerned about? How can we ease their fears, and guiding them in terms of, this is what, for instance, the Chinese are looking for. This is what the Russians are looking for. These are how these threat actor groups are behaving. So how can we help you best mitigate risk and best reduce potential impact from a successful attack? Because at the end of the
Right.
day, no one has an unlimited budget.
Right. It must feel nice to help them in that preparation, especially with something, so scary as cyber attack, that just seems, I don't know, amorphous, or huge, but yeah, that preparation to give them tools, I guess, what's that like, and how, I guess, how do they receive that, or, what are their considerations when they're thinking about how to prepare?
So you touched on a really interesting bifurcation for me in terms of, yes, you can work with a big company and you help them and you do really cool projects and very tangible things. And that's part of what drew me to defense, is like, you can walk up and put your hand on a factory and say, this has a massive impact. This building produces something. It's critical to national defense. Or like, I drive past the Boeing factory on the way to the
Yeah.
airport whenever I get on a plane. Whether or not they're a client, whether or not I'm working with them, that's really cool to me that you can see that tangible impact. And at the same time, there are hundreds of thousands of people at these companies. And so you each have your hammer and you're hammering away at that wall or you're building that wall. And that's great. One of the things that I love the most is working with smaller defense contractors. And I do that through AFCEA and through some of my involvement in cyber communities here in South Carolina, where it's not a $50 million project. It's for $500. I can show you how to implement basic security controls, or I can show you how to update your cyber hygiene in such a way that it makes an outsized impact. Where that small investment, and maybe it's not a defense contractor, maybe it's a healthcare organization, what have you, that sort of pro bono work where a little bit of prevention goes so far and you see that sigh of relief, that's really cool to me. And that's really meaningful.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And then I wanted to ask, how are you disruptive? This podcast is, kind of features emerging leaders or those that can help emerging leaders in their community, be disruptive. What's your take on that? Or how do you have to be disruptive, in your field? And I guess your perspective.
It, yeah, in my perspective, I think it's a mixture of telling people the truth that's not always convenient. And that's part of my role as a consultant, right? Is going, okay, let me help you and let me give you that truth that maybe you can't see or you don't want to see. And then how can we work through that together? Let me give you my hand, come with me, and we'll work on this together and we'll fix it for you. On the other side, I think coming from my background in terms of cyber resilience, which was so much bringing different people to the table. So you're bringing operations, you're bringing cybersecurity, you're bringing IT, which is different from business operations, right? And then you're bringing together senior and executive leadership and all these different groups that never talk to each other normally or very rarely, and they kind of find each other annoying. Um, and getting them to speak the same language under pressure and getting them to work together. I think that focusing on that people side is disruptive to the common thought that cyber is just a bunch of people pounding away at keyboards who make me use two-factor authentication that's annoying. And so at the end of the day, it's flipping that paradigm of it's not about the technology, it's really about the people. And maybe that's how I'm disruptive.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I like shaking up the industry too a little bit. I find sometimes the inconvenient truth is the one that leads you to a really interesting solution.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yeah. And then tell us a little bit kind of about your journey. How did you become a consultant? Where did your interest start with that? Or kind of, what was your journey? What did you study? What was your journey kind of to get into that career?
Yeah, so I touched on this interesting family history in the beginning of the episode where my grandmother worked for OWI writing propaganda for the Allies, and my grandfather studied borreliosis in scientists on the Manhattan Project, and also the machinists as well. And then my father inadvertently wound up being pretty involved, even though he's a marine biologist, in understanding kind of how chemistry within the ocean impacts bioluminescence and phosphorescence and the impacts that can make to, for instance, remote sensing and studying where ships are, submarines are, etc. So looking at how do things change the ocean when they move through it. And then there's also this next layer of kind of scientific contribution on that side and then service in the Navy on the other. So I've had this sort of meandering back and forth of, well, I want to be in business, and I worked for a venture capital funded startup in high school, and then I studied international business. And my two hardest professors in undergrad became my two closest mentors. And one of them actually was a special advisor to Tom Ridge during the Bush administration when they started developing the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. And so from that point on, I got really involved and interested in security, and I knew cybersecurity was an emerging field. So having grown up in this computer lab and being self-trained, I just kind of dug into it, found myself in financial services. And then from there, honestly was kind of in the right place at the right time in terms of they needed someone to help with this new program, and I happened to know the leadership, so they pulled me over. And then same thing coming to EY. I happened to know someone who I'd met at a conference years before, and EY was hiring, and they went, "Whoa, like we need resilience people." And so I've come over, and then since then, I've actually helped build the what is now the Cyber Incident Resilience and Response Program, which is an offering of the firm. It's basically a global integrated cyber resilience and incident response and management service offering. And so I got to do that, which was great, working with a global team of experts. And then from there, I was kind of in the right place at the right time and got a referral to this role, and it's just clicked. And I love it because we are going up against some of the biggest consultancies who have really well-respected name in the field. And EY hasn't dug into commercial aerospace and defense as much as some of these other firms on the consulting side. So in a way, it's spinning up almost a nascent division within a massive company. Like we're running a startup with some really brilliant people. And so that's been really special to me.
Yeah, that's exciting. And what's the financial industry like? What's it like to work in that industry as someone who's never, I just do my banking and whatnot, but there's different pressures, I'm sure, in the financial industry. Things cannot fail. Banks have to be protected in a way, I guess, that's different than, obviously, a defense system. Very, very both equally, vital, critical infrastructure. But what was that like? And then kind of, what did you bring? What perspective, having been in that industry, offers you in the defense industry now, I guess?
Yeah. Financial services is really interesting in my mind because you have the lifeblood of the global economy flowing through your organization. And if a major bank's payment system goes down, that can be $1 trillion+ a day that suddenly cannot flow through the American economy. And so when you think about the financial system, think about um, the air travel system, where you have hubs and spokes and terminating destinations, etc. And those hubs, like Atlanta, Hartsfield Jackson, which I know way too well, could be the equivalent of a systemically important financial institution, a SIFI, which is one of those biggest banks that are too big to fail. And so money is flowing through it, not just from you and me, but from bank to bank to bank, syndicating deals, etc. Well, what happens if Hartsfield Jackson gets taken out due to an ice storm and no planes can fly in or out? That's a sort of challenge that we get to deal with in terms of what does happen economically and how do the other banks respond? And so it's this invisible hand of the market in a way. And I would say it's so mission critical that you really look at those tolerances and you really look at what do you have to do to make it resilient, both for yourself and the greater mission, right? And the greater the economy, not just because the CEO would wind up in front of Congress during an inquiry if it did go down. But long story short, I like to think of defense as obviously so mission critical. Those systems can't go down. You need redundancies, etc. But what's really cool to me is that you have a very dynamic environment where you're not necessarily going from stationary to stationary system. You're looking at things that are moving hundreds of miles an hour in the field. You're looking at um, corporate systems that, if they were to go down or if they were to be compromised, could compromise national security secrets, etc. But where I think there are a lot of similarities too are in terms of the bad guys. Because if you look at it, you're getting the worst of the worst for both industries, just different types of motivations. And so that's one of the things, quite honestly, that gets me excited about it is I get to go toe to toe with some of the worst bad guys, and we get to figure out how do we beat them? How do we defend against them? What are they doing next? And that helps me get really animated when I start talking with a client. And you can probably hear the passion in my voice around that too. It's a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, awesome. And then I'd love to talk about Charleston. That's where you're based. I have family there. Shout out to Laura and the fam. But yeah, tell us your perspective of kind of either growing up in that area and doing work in that area, and then we can kind of delve into, joint base Charleston and kind of go from there. But
Yeah. So Charleston, obviously beautiful city. We keep getting all these tourist accolades. Um, Locals both love and bemoan the tourists, but we are very grateful for your presence here. It's a lovely day covered in pollen today, as I sit here looking
uh,
out my window. But what I would say that's so interesting about Charleston, and I keep getting pulled back here because I do have family here and I'm born and raised here, um, is that especially in the defense community, it's really small and insular in a good way, in that it's tough to get involved with the community. People want to know you, they want to know your kids if you have them, they want to know your partner, like they want to know your family history before they'll ever do business with you or trust you. And so there's that personal component of it's not just what can you do for me? What can I do for you? It's really getting to know people. And I think AFCEA has been great in that regard, getting involved, really making impact, and also personally getting my name out there and showing that I'm invested in the community and people appreciate that.
right, sure. And kind of something that I've just found out from you today is that you're going to be the new president of the AFCEA Lowcountry Chapter.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you so
And
much. It's
yeah,
it's honestly a huge honor.
yeah. And so tell us about that and kind of, that takes effect. I forget when our years are, but what will you be up to and kind of your chapter's perspective, I guess.
Yeah,
No
so
pressure.
no pressure, right? So part of what we've struggled with, and we talked a lot about this at West in our roundtables, was that our membership is down and our engagement is down. And so part of that was COVID took a real toll on professional organizations and getting people together. It's tough when you're running on a skeleton crew and when people aren't necessarily as invested in engaging in the community or they don't see the value. And I think that's one of those challenges about recruiting younger people is they may not register how much value you get out of an organization like AFCEA, especially in a market like Charleston. So we're coming out of this time where we had amazing leadership. Jennifer Greenwell, she's really kept us afloat and done some awesome things. And so Maggie Brooks and I, who's going to be one of the vice presidents, and Valerie Warnock, shout out to them, are working on really building our recognition and highlighting our business case both to sponsors and to particularly the emerging leader crowd in terms of what are you giving in and what are you getting out in terms of like your business value, your brand notoriety, etc. But also how can we help that younger generation? And I think what we're thinking about is basically showing, look, we're giving you prime access to people who normally would not want to connect with you or would not trust you. And I think that's part of it is bringing people together face to face and showing we're invested in this insular community that is very distrustful of outsiders. So part of it is looking beyond just the established companies who are always supportive of ASEA, but also let's reach out to those new folks and say, hey, come into the fold. Let's work on this mission together.
Right. I love that. Because the area itself I know is home to the Naval Information Warfare Center, NAWIC Atlantic, which is a huge naval component to the one that's on the Pacific and does a lot of the key aspects of naval information warfare. And it is a joint base, so I think there's Army and Air Force contingents as well. There's I know a big I think it's called the Palmetto, oh, I'm forgetting the name, but there's a consortium that's pulling in emerging technologies. Um, and I know AFCEA was involved in or went down to see the Palmetto STEM bus last year that was kind of
Oh
a big
yeah.
thing to help, kids get involved with STEM. So it does seem like an exciting region to, especially for, technology that, we're concerned about with AFCEA, communications and electronics. But I guess, you talked about kind of companies that, are maybe more established in Charleston that have always been kind of AFCEA members and trying to kind of build a bigger, broader community, especially with younger people. But kind of what's the industry like there, or what are you seeing as far as, I don't know, engagement, I guess?
So I think we're going to face an existential challenge as smaller defense contractors moving forward with AI and with a lot of these emerging technologies changing both the battlefield and the way that companies produce things. Because it's what I'm finding is there are these boutique firms that are really good at what they do, but they have to innovate in order to just stay current, as opposed to how do they, on limited resources, leapfrog ahead and really maintain that competitive edge and further that mission even faster. And so um, I see a lot of these companies kind of banding together and working together to figure out how do we do this. And what's been really interesting to me, getting involved with the community here, is largely that as a young professional in the industry, if I can still call myself that, I guess I'm an emerging leader. Um, you wind up being a little bit more of a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and the other fish kind of trust you, which has really helped me in that regard. And what I'm suspecting too, because we have some major defense contractors who have been moving in here, is we're going to see, in my mind, a little bit of a consolidation of some of these smaller outfits or acquisition of them by the bigger ones so that they can actually gain more access to the local community and to some of the leadership they need. And I think that that poses an opportunity for AFCEA and for more collaboration. The other thing, and I'll stop off my soapbox in just a second, but the bifurcation in terms of munitions production and technology production for the services and where the different branches are going is probably going to change the way that boutique defense contractors do business largely in terms of and even the big guys, because you've got quote low cost munitions and drones and things, and then you have these more expensive versions that are coming out that are incredible planes that do amazing things. And then you have these, I think it was the Air Force just put out a new drone requisition for several major defense contractors. And one of the criteria was going 600 miles an hour, 30 feet in the air. That's pretty amazing, but we're going to have to adapt and figure out what is our business model as a small firm. And then from the EY perspective, we're figuring out how do we best help our clients, right? Like they're dealing with these major challenges. What can we do to bring them to the table and to bring emerging technologies to them?
Right, sure. And in operating in this, environment with its challenges and what we've all faced ahead with cyber and, just national security threats, what kind of advice do you have for senior leaders, or, if you had their ear, what would you tell them from your perspective? And not just military leaders, but, executives or officials.
Yeah, that's not a loaded question at all. No, so honestly, when I look at cyber and I look at the HR challenges we're facing, and just in general, I think defense too, um, take a chance on people. Like maybe that sounds overly simple, but that's how I got my start in cyber and defense. And I couldn't have gotten to where I am in defense in particular without leaders taking me under their wing or without them going, hey, here's this smart kid who's really passionate about this, even though he comes from financial services. Let's let him try a few things and see if he has some good ideas. And I think that that's something I would urge leaders to do is when you have a promising individual, invest in them and give them a shot. And you might just be surprised.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Especially, I don't know how much animosity there is between generations, but sometimes it seems like there's a little bit more than I remember from before. And I love that just advice, like, just somebody's passionate and, you can take a chance on them. Yeah, I love that. And then on the flip side, kind of what advice do you have for the younger generation, or what would you tell your younger self, um, you know, advice about something?
I was having a conversation with a friend about this earlier today, and um, there are two things I would say. One is don't be afraid to raise your hand and take on that challenge, but ask for help earlier on when you
Mhm.
start seeing problems. So, or you need help, right? Like, don't wait until it's 3 days before the deadline. Raise your hand shortly after and go, hey, I need some backup here. Can someone who knows what's going on really help me because you've given me this shot? Um, so that's a lesson I've learned the hard way. But on the other side, there's part of me that's been learning this really tough lesson about I'm a better employee and I'm a better contributor just in general if I'm better as a person and well. And so what I quoted to the crew team, I was coxing for them, the person who
Oh,
yells at them from the boat, right?
love that.
And I said, one of my favorite quotes about every body leading up to the top of Everest was once a motivated individual. So maybe you could calm down a little bit. And that's a little bit dark, but at the same time, to me, it's like take a breather. Doesn't all have to be done right away. And take one step after another, and you'll eventually reach that goal. But also, the little detours probably aren't detours. They're probably a step to the side you have to take to learn a lesson.
Right, sure. And then I imagine as a consultant, and I know this because we were kind of talking and we were different in different parts of the country over the last couple of weeks. What's it like to you're traveling a lot, I imagine, as a consultant. So how do you balance that? Any tips do you have? For someone who's always on the go, are you the type of person when you get to the hotel, do you like unpack in the drawers? How do you maintain life on the road, I guess?
Um, Invest in a good portable steamer.
Oh, I like that.
I have no interest in using a hotel iron that someone made a grilled cheese on. And my client sure as heck doesn't want to see my shirt afterwards.
I love
So
that.
I would say portable steamer is a good one. Um, Portable little power strip. And then
Okay.
also, um, I'm still figuring that out, right? Like I can joke about the little things, but it's still a huge adjustment to me because I started at EY during the pandemic. And so we weren't traveling or we were traveling very minimally. And some engagements, you're on the road all the time. Some engagements, you're not. And so, if anything, it's learning how to be adaptable and learning how to maintain a semblance of normalcy and routine when you're running around like mad. So I wish I had an easy catch-all solution, but I don't, outside of maybe a portable steamer and good
Right.
noise canceling headphones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in some ways I feel like, I don't know, the US, I mean, it's a huge country, but I feel like we're more connected than ever. Like I hear more about what's going on in different regions than ever I did before. And that makes me want to, go to those places and figure out what they're doing there. And I don't know, do you have that perspective where we just seem to be a little bit more interconnected? I don't know.
Oh yeah, both for better and worse. And what's
Yeah.
kind of funny is, um, I am more connected than I've ever been, apropos your point, in terms of I have Teams plings going off at 2 a.m. sometimes, and I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. But from people halfway around the world who need help with something, which is amazing in my mind. And at the same time, you've got to be careful about setting boundaries. And so there's that. But at the same time, I don't really use social media. Like LinkedIn's about it. And so I think that and maybe this dovetails off your question about how do you maintain your sanity while you're traveling, is also figure out how to set some of those limits. Because even though consulting can be all consuming, I'm learning and working on setting better limits. And I think that's incredibly important for any professional in their development. And it's not a one size fits all thing, right? Like you're always going to be working on that.
Right, sure. Those were most of my questions. Anything else you wanted to share or that I missed that you'd like to highlight?
If anything, I'd like to comment on how it's okay to have a circuitous path. And as my dad says, it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, where one door opens and you may have never expected it, and it might be a weird size, and you go, "Oh, what's in this?" And you walk through, and there's a new opportunity there. And so, and that might happen 50 times throughout your career, and sometimes you don't take the door, sometimes you do. But that to me has come in handier than I would have expected looking at 22-year-old Jake. Um, and I think that if anything might be my parting nugget of wisdom to the emerging leaders is like, hey, it's perfectly fine to take a detour. It's perfectly fine to not be where you want to be because you're learning something that will come in handy later on. And as long as you're marching towards that goal, take a sidestep, take an adventure, go try something new. Because at the end of the day, you're the sum of your experiences, right? So you'll be a more beautiful person at the end of all of this.
Right. Yeah. I think for those of us, and I definitely took a circuitous path in life in all areas, but some people, have just a very straight line in their career. They know what they've done this, and then they're doing that, and 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 I understand that. But I think for those of us who aren't on that method, it can be scary. Like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What sector am I going to work in? What am I going to do? And so I love that advice that it's okay. You know, take a deep breath. It's okay.
Take a breather. You'll get to the top of Everest eventually. It'll be fine. That's kind of my nugget of wisdom. And that's what I find too. The higher up you go in consulting, honestly, the more chill the people because they've been through a lot. And they're like, it's okay. We'll figure it out.
I like that. Yeah, just have the confidence that it will be okay. Be passionate about it, but we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna find
Yeah.
some answers. Yeah, yeah. There's a sense of power from that, I think.
Or at least
Oh,
I tell myself that. But
right.
at the end of the day, it's I try to look at it as an adventure, whether I'm walking to the airport and going to, I don't know, the middle of Kansas, or I'm headed off to Panama. It's all an adventure.
Right. And where are you off to next in real life?
I would like to say someplace super glamorous, but I think I'm going to Jersey next week.
Oh, Jersey. Shut
No offense to Jersey,
up.
but I it's a new experience for me. So we'll
Yeah.
see. Maybe I'll give
Oh,
you a review next time.
yeah. Well, love that. And thanks so much, Jake, for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Kimberly. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna come down to the chapter and check it out and take in Charleston, go see the River Dogs, which the minor
Please
league
do.
baseball team. But yeah, so thanks for holding down the fort down there, and can't wait to see what the chapter will be up to over the next year or so.
Thanks. We'll keep you posted. It should be
All
fun.
right. Okay. Well, thank you.